What up, fam? Good long Sunday morning walk. I've talked about this a few times, but it's in my head a lot from my own experiences as a son and a parent, but also a lot of experiences from clients, whether it was students or other clients or even consulting clients. Even when I do workshops, I get these questions a lot about being a parent of neurodivergent children. What are things that the parents can do for their children? And there's not one answer. And I know a lot of times we want like an easy guide of steps to follow, or a clear guide, I should say. I don't think we expect it to be easy, but we expect that there's this secret formula, right? The thing is, you have to figure out what that secret formula is for your kid or kids, right? It's going to be different. But what you do know is that if your kid is your biological kid, strong likelihood that some of the things that worked for you and the kid's other parent will also work for them. And think about some of the things that you needed when you were growing up. Some of the things that you wish you had, or some of the things that worked really well, right? Even if it's not your biological kid, right? They're still growing up in your family system. So the whole nurture versus nature argument, they're still picking up dynamics of you and the system that you have created that they live in. So you can still think about that, right? You can think about what helps you in that system. And then you can try some things, right? But take note of those things you try. I got something for them flies today, y'all. I'm swatting. They come around here. One came and I swatted it. Anyway, look, figuring out those strengths, right? Figuring out those things that they needed by looking at your own needs, right? Your own areas where you were able to thrive. Those are good ideas. But you need to keep a record of this. Even if you're just texting it to yourself, emailing it to yourself, doing audio messages, if you're writing it down in a journal, maybe even doing like an Excel sheet or something. But you need to do some form of tracking about what you've tried, what works, and what doesn't. Because there's going to be points in time where some things that worked stop working and you got to try something else, right? This is why we need a combination of solutions. Everything is a system. When you talk about us neurodivergent folks, especially us ADHD folks, we vacillate back and forth between things that work and don't work. Sometimes I love planners and they work for me. Sometimes they don't at all, right? But I have to recognize that moment when they don't work and I got to implement something else from my ready to go list of stuff that's worked in the past. But also keep my eye open to things that work that might be new. So some examples of things that work for me. I used to love taking these little small like moleskin notebooks around, and I would have different color fine tip pens that I would write in different colors. I often didn't even go back and look at the notes that I wrote down, but having that habit of carrying that book around with me everywhere I went, and then also having all my notes in those fine tip colors, it just helped me remember things a little bit better, right? Now, after doing that for 4 years, it stopped working. So then I had to figure out something else. Well, then I had a system where I would email myself some important notes and I would make the subject line relevant to the topic of the email and I would star it so I could make it easy to find in Gmail. Those are just some examples. But you got to figure out some things that work for you, all right? That's what it's about, to keep walking. But that's what it's about, to keep trying. That's all it is. Everything doesn't work all the time. I got thrown off with 4th of July with my routine. And that's all right, because the motto is bend, but don't break. And if you don't have the ability to bend, I promise you are overlooking your strengths, because you cannot be alive in this world and not learn how to bend to some degree. Now, I would argue the greater layers of privilege you have, the less bending you do, and the greater layers of intersectionality you have, the more bending you do. In both of those scenarios and both of those ends of the extreme, it is easier to break as well. Because one, you're too rigid because you can be, so it's easier to break. We see that a lot, this whole crowd yelling about, oh, turn down DEI, blah, blah, because they're uncomfortable. They're not used to bending. So now they're bending and they're breaking. But also, when you bend all the damn time, you get tired of bending. You get worn at those same points that you've been bending, and eventually you break. We have to recognize that in ourselves. We either need to become more flexible and more comfortable with bending so that we can bend more to a greater degree and more frequently. Or we also need to understand that we're strong, that we're brilliant, that we're beautiful, that we're creative. And we don't have to bend so damn much. So that's a little bit of a mixed talk, but guess what? That's what we do. Keep walking.